He handed me a liability waiver and thought he was taking something from me. He was actually handing me the only weapon I needed. My name is Elena. I am 33 years old, and I have an engineering degree from one of the top programs in the country. I have spent the last 9 years doing work that most people do not think about until it fails. I calculate loads. I verify tolerances. I check whether the thing holding the roof up can actually hold the roof up. It is not glamorous work. It does not photograph well. But when it is done right, nobody gets hurt, and buildings stand for decades without anyone giving a second thought to why. My father, Conrad, owns a mid-sized construction firm. I joined the company 8 years ago with the understanding that my role was technical lead and that the business would eventually pass to me. That understanding was never written down, which is the first thing I should have corrected and didn't. The second thing I should have corrected was believing that my work would speak for itself. My sister Vanessa joined the company 2 years after I did. She has a degree in hospitality management and a very precise understanding of what things look like in photographs. She does not know how to read a structural drawing. She does not know what a load-bearing calculation is or how to perform one. She knows colors and textures and a specific vocabulary that wealthy clients respond to in presentations. Conrad decided these were the more important skills. He gave her the title of creative director and began scheduling her into client meetings that had previously been my domain. I did not complain. I kept working. I kept fixing things. The journal I carried on every job was a black field notebook. Worn down at the corners, the cover stained with coffee and sight dust. I had filled 230 pages of it over 5 years. Some entries were technical, measurements and notes and material specifications. But some of them were the other kind of record. The kind you keep when you know, somewhere underneath the part of yourself that is still hoping things will change, that they are not going to change. There was an entry from a night in November when the security guard had quit and no one could afford to let the copper wiring sit unguarded overnight. Conrad was at a client dinner. I slept on a stack of drywall under a tarp until morning. He never mentioned it. There was an entry about the time I wrote a personal check to the plumbing crew because Conrad had forgotten payroll and the foreman had told me his men were about to walk off site. I covered it myself and did not tell Conrad how the problem had resolved. He assumed it had resolved itself. There was an entry from 3 in the morning when I discovered that Vanessa had ordered imported stone for a ballroom floor without checking whether the subfloor could support the weight. It could not. I spent 3 nights fixing the structural issue before installation, paying the carpenters overtime out of my own pocket. At the ribbon cutting, Vanessa told the client the floor had a particularly solid feel, a design choice she had been very intentional about. I still have that journal. I kept it when I cleaned out my desk. I put it in the box with my grandfather's drafting compass and my framed MIT certificate and taped the box shut with the slow, deliberate movements of a person who has just made a decision and is waiting for the steadiness to confirm it. Vanessa was already in my office, measuring the wall behind my desk, when I finished taping the box. She was talking to Conrad about the space, about energy flow, about a water feature she wanted installed where my degree had hung. She did not look at me while she spoke. I had become a logistical detail to be handled rather than a person in the room. Conrad told me to leave my keys at the gate. He said it like a formality, the way you might remind someone to return a library book. He handed me a clipboard after I dropped the keys into his palm. It was a liability transfer document. By signing it, I was formally and legally relinquishing my status as architect of record on the project. All supervision responsibilities, all permit coverage, all professional accountability would transfer to whatever arrangement he made next. He thought this was a punishment. He thought he was stripping me of authority and protecting the company from my future interference. He had not thought carefully about what the document actually did in the other direction. If I was no longer the architect of record from this moment forward, then every decision made after this moment was entirely his. Every corner cut, every inspection bypassed, every structural choice made by someone who had never read a load calculation in her life, all of it would belong to him. The document he was handing me was not a dismissal. It was a full transfer of liability. I uncapped my pen. I signed it. I dated it to the exact minute. I handed the clipboard back and told him good luck. The foreman's name was Pete. He was leaning against a lumber stack when I walked through the site toward the parking lot. He had been with the company for 6 years, and he understood things that did not need to be said directly. He looked at the box under my arm and then at my face, and he understood the situation in about 4 seconds. I stopped and kept my voice low. I told him to pack his tools. I told him not to finish the shift. I told him to make sure his crew cashed their checks before the close of business. He did not ask questions. He nodded once and I kept walking. In my car, I ran the air conditioning until the heat broke, and then I opened my laptop. The city's construction supervision portal loaded in a few seconds. My professional profile was current and active. I navigated to the project page and found the button I had been thinking about since Conrad handed me the clipboard. Withdraw as supervising architect. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because it was not what people expect when they imagine revenge. It was not hot or electric or satisfying in any dramatic way. It was more like the feeling of setting down something very heavy after carrying it for so long that you had stopped registering the weight. A kind of quiet, clean neutrality. I pressed the button. The system updated immediately. An automatic alert went to the city inspector's office. The project was now flagged as operating without license supervision. A stop work order would follow as a matter of standard procedure. I had not called anyone. I had not filed a complaint. I had simply updated my professional status, which I was legally required to do. I closed the laptop and drove home. Conrad called at 4:15. I was pouring a glass of red wine when the phone started moving across the counter. I let it buzz twice before I answered and put it on speaker. His voice was not what I expected. It was not controlled or careful. It was the voice of a man who has just encountered something he did not model for and is processing it at full volume. He told me the inspector had arrived and posted a stop work notice on the gate. He told me the site was shut down. He told me I had done this deliberately to destroy him. I told him I had updated my professional licensing status as required by law, that the stop work order was automatic when a project of that size lost its supervising architect, and that I had not made a single phone call to anyone. The silence that followed had a specific texture. It was the silence of someone doing arithmetic and arriving at a number they do not want to be correct. He told me to come back. I told him I was suspended and could not return to an active project under those circumstances. He told me the clients were coming for a walkthrough at the end of the week. I told him the licensing board's review process typically ran 6 weeks and that the board met on Tuesdays. I told him good luck with the energy flow. I ended the call. 3 weeks passed. I did not visit the site. I did not need to. Pete called me occasionally, always late at night, with a specific quality of voice that people use when they are telling you something they already know. You are not going to want to hear. The call I had been dreading came on a Tuesday at 11:30. Pete's voice was tight and low. He told me Vanessa had ordered the crew to remove the central column in the ballroom, the main load-bearing support, the steel post that was holding the HVAC system on the roof. I asked him to repeat it. He told me the client had threatened to pull the contract if the open concept plan was not realized immediately. Vanessa had decided the column was an aesthetic problem. Pete had explained to her, in the specific terms that foremen use when they are trying to be understood by someone who is not listening, that removing that column would reduce the shear capacity of the structure to zero, that the ceiling would not hold, that someone could be killed. She had told him he was stuck in the past. Pete had walked off the job. His crew had walked with him. But before he left, he had seen Vanessa move to the parking lot with a wad of cash and come back with a group of unlicensed day laborers. They were already inside with sledgehammers. I hung up and opened my phone. Vanessa had posted to Instagram at 2 in the morning. She needed the client to see progress. She needed to document her own vision being realized. The photo showed the ballroom under work lights, concrete dust across the floor, rubble piled where the base of the column had been. The center of the room was open now. The ceiling above it, if you knew what to look for, had a slight concavity that should not have been there. The caption said the ugly post was gone. Open concept achieved. She had tagged the project by name. I took a screenshot. As a licensed architect, I have a mandatory reporting obligation. If I observe a structural safety hazard and do not report it, I risk losing my license. I composed an email to the City Enforcement Division and the project's insurance carrier. I described the alteration. I attached the original blueprints showing the column as a critical load-bearing element. I attached Vanessa's Instagram post, timestamped 40 minutes earlier, showing the column removed. I pressed send. The cascade started the next morning and moved faster than I had anticipated. The city emergency team arrived at 7 and condemned the building, not paused it. Condemned it. Yellow tape across the gate. Vacate order on the door. The site classified as an imminent structural hazard. The bank's loan agreement contained a standard good standing clause. A condemned property is a distressed asset. The algorithm flagged it before noon and triggered the acceleration clause. $2.5 million of construction loan called immediately. The insurance company received my report and opened an investigation. The finding came back the same afternoon. The policy covered accidents. It did not cover the deliberate removal of a structural element without permits, particularly when the person who ordered the removal had documented the decision on a public social media account. The claim was denied. The policy was voided. The Hamiltons filed a breach of contract suit for $4.2 million before the business day ended. Conrad came to my apartment 3 days later. I heard the knock and looked through the peephole before I answered. He looked like a person who has been awake for too long carrying something that keeps getting heavier. His suit was the same one he had been wearing in court documents I had seen circulating. He held a document against his chest. I opened the door to the length of the security chain. He asked me to sign a retroactive authorization stating that I had approved the column removal before I left. If I did, the insurance might reconsider. The bank might negotiate. He might be able to keep the house. He was asking me to sign a fraudulent document to protect him from the consequences of a decision he made, that Vanessa made, and that I had specifically formally, legally removed myself from before it happened. I told him I could not sign off on physics. He said we were family. I told him he had removed the support. Gravity had done the rest. I closed the door. The latch clicked with the particular finality of something that cannot be walked back. The bankruptcy proceeding concluded on a Tuesday. Morrison Construction was liquidated. The Hamilton judgment absorbed most of the assets. The house covered the remainder. Conrad moved into a one-bedroom rental in a part of the city that bears no resemblance to the neighborhood where he used to host clients. Vanessa relocated across the country and reinvented herself in the way that people reinvent themselves when the version of them that made the original mistakes has become inconvenient. She sells things online now and attributes her professional difficulties to difficult colleagues and bad timing. I work for a development firm that pays me accurately and expects me to leave at 5. I sleep through the night. I do not carry a company phone. 6 months after the liquidation, I received a voicemail. Conrad's voice slower than I remembered. He said it was Thanksgiving. He said my mother would have wanted the family together. He said he was willing to forgive me if I came home. I listened to the message twice. I noted the specific construction of it, the way it centered his willingness to forgive rather than any acknowledgement of what had been done. The way it used my mother's name as leverage, the way it assumed that I was the one who required forgiveness. In this situation, I pressed delete. I blocked the number. That evening, I had dinner with Pete and his wife and their 2 kids. We ate too much and laughed about things that had nothing to do with construction schedules or liability clauses or the specific weight of a roof that nobody is holding up anymore. I have thought many times about the question underneath all of this, and I still do not have a clean answer. I was the one holding everything together for 9 years. I knew what was happening. I kept patching the cracks and reinforcing the joists and paying the crews and writing the entries in the journal and telling myself that eventually the work would be enough to change how they saw me. It wasn't. It was never going to be. The question I keep returning to is not whether I should have left sooner. It is whether there is a version of me that could have left sooner. Whether the same qualities that made me good at the work, the patience, the commitment to seeing things through, the belief that problems have solutions if you apply enough precision, were also the qualities that kept me standing under a roof that was never going to stop, needing me to hold it up. I genuinely do not know. What I wonder is whether you do.